Hi, I'm Dan Worth, and I'll be your host for this computing web seminar. Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, or VDI, has been around for some time now, and yet has not quite achieved the levels of adoption once predicted. The reasons for this may be that unlike other forms of virtualization which are invisible to the end user, VDI is front-end. It is the way non-technical staff interact with the organization's infrastructure to do their jobs, and sadly the early experience of many end users were not always good ones. Complaints about slowness, boot storms, large numbers of machines going down at the same time, and a lack of flexibility to do what they wanted to do soon took the shine off the vendor's claims for VDI, leading some IT teams to return to standalone desktops or to operate some sort of uncomfortable halfway house. This is a shame because the logic behind VDI is impeccable, with huge potential advantages for both the IT team and end users. For IT, maintaining a single operating system image makes upgrades and patches far simpler and also cheaper and more energy efficient. VDI also makes working remotely and on a variety of devices simpler and more secure, and adding new users to a system is a breeze. In fact, the problems reported by end users often had more to do with the underlying infrastructure supporting VDI than with VDI itself. Legacy servers and suboptimal storage and networking struggled under the weight of many users making demands of VDI simultaneously, making all of those users unhappy at the same time. To be successful, VDI needs a holistic approach, considering the supporting infrastructure at the same time. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. And to do that, I'm delighted to be joined by two experts on the topic. On my left, we have Martin Finch, Enterprise Solutions Manager at Fujitsu, and to his left, we have Andy Trevor, Managing Director of the Cutter Group. We're also joined by Peter Gothard as our Research Editor for the event. There's also a chance for you to get involved through our live polls and ask questions to the panel as well. So, chaps, thanks for joining us today. Just hear a little bit about yourselves and where you come at VDI from in this market.
So Martin Finch, Enterprise Solutions Manager from Fujitsu. I'm responsible for integrated systems, which encompasses hyperconverged and converged systems, which we provide as the base infrastructure for VDI solutions, and partner them with Cutters, who then provide enhancements on top of that and finesse those VDI solutions on top of that proven infrastructure.
Great, thank you. And Andy, heard a little bit about you there. But
yep, Andy Trevor, Managing Director of Cutter Group. We're a group of 3 companies working across EMEA. And providing specialist VDI solutions for customers ranging from small education establishments up to national government.
Great, thank you. So before we kick off our discussion, as I mentioned, the first poll will be live now for you to answer, which should be live on your screen now. And so we ask, do you use virtual desktop infrastructure? The answers are yes, and we are happy with it. Yes, but we are experiencing problems. We're in the process of deploying. We're thinking about it, or no. So please vote on that now, and we'll discuss those results later during the event. So let's sort of really kick into this then. VDI, where are we at now with VDI? We're hearing that some problems holding back the potential. Is that still true now? Is it evolving into a new dimension?
It's less true now. Previously, people would dive into VDI scenarios without great thought, just thinking it was going to deliver great solutions immediately. Now there's a bit more research going into why and how people want to do that, and there's more understanding of the specific requirements. We're also seeing that the hardware developed now to such a level that it's giving far greater performance to deliver against VDI solutions. So people that are adopting it sensibly, understanding the requirements up front, and then designing it correctly can get tremendous advantages.
Sure. Yeah, I think early days, Martin's right, people are kind of jumping into it. And actually, like a lot of the industry, sales forces were driving how VDI was being pushed on an establishment. And actually, only 25% of a VDI deployment is anything to do with the technology. 75% of it's about expectation management, understanding where it fits, more importantly where it doesn't fit, understanding the user's workflow, understanding that whatever you do for that user, bearing in mind you are going to be taking certain flexibility away, but you're going to be giving things back to them that enhances the way they can do their day-to-day job. So the engagements that we have with all the customers are completely vendor agnostic, platform agnostic to start with, and it's about sitting down with the user, be it from one of the kids at school right the way through to some of the government users that we work with, is understanding what they need now, but also what they're going to need in the future, because this will change the way that things are worked. But as I say, 75% of a VDI deployment's about that expectation management, change management and understanding. And then once you've got that picture right, you can then start looking at the technology that fits in behind there.
Sure, and you mentioned now like schools and governments, two very disparate type of organisations, but your VDI now is being considered by all these different types of businesses. You're seeing that out there in the market.
Yeah, very much so. Across all verticals, there is a VDI conversation to be had with most organisations these days. Typically, you start looking at the cost effectiveness around about 100 desktops, and then working up. The more you deploy, the more cost effective it's going to be. But there will be certain business cases where you've got significantly less numbers which would justify a VDI deployment because of the business cases and business drivers behind it. But normal, traditional end user computing done on PCs for your knowledge workers and things like that, the cost effective levels are around about 100 desktops. But below that, if there's some specialist requirements, then you can build a business case to justify it as well.
Okay. And is that something Fujitsu sees, this evolving market, different types of businesses sort of you're seeing using your kit, that kind of thing?
We're seeing great push in the education sector, great push in healthcare areas where that's the main conversations. But as Andy said, it's across sector. And what we tend to do is we tend to size our solutions, predefine them, and have bespoke sizes for numbers of VDI users on an average that then Andy will then take and with his team refine on top of that to deliver the performance for each individual application and user on top of that. But we have package solutions that are ready to deploy, so they can be deployed very, very quickly in a proof of concept or even onto customer site as a baseline for that infrastructure.
Sure. And are people more aware of, you talked there about 75% of it is about expectation management and the sort of the pre-planning. Are people more savvy about that now, do you think? Or is there still that having to sort of educate them that
they're getting more savvy about it. Over the last few years, there's been significant horror stories about VDI deployments, which has made people think twice. Because it had been approached in the wrong way. It had been approached from a technology front and not an end user front. You're seeing more and more people now becoming aware of that, more and more confidence in the market because there are more successful VDI deployments now. And people are understanding how that engagement works. And of course, with the advent of the converged and the hyperconverged infrastructure solutions that are around now, some of the risk is also being taken away because it's, as Martin said, pre-packaged and pre-validated to allow the purchaser to buy something with very little risk on their head.
That's interesting. I think we'll come on to the sort of the benefits of hyperconverged in a little while. But so that's interesting. So people are aware of it, but perhaps we need to find out why they are. And Peter, perhaps we can turn to you for our first bit of research about the reasons people look to VDI and what they hope to achieve from it.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So yeah, to begin with, we have two slides to go through. You should see the first one on your screens now. We're looking at why people chose to adopt, and then we'll look at the needs they feel have been met by actually adopting. So to begin with, as you'll see, 48% of people were looking to adopt to achieve increased flexible or mobile working, while 46% were saying they'd be looking for easier maintenance and upgrades. It's also interesting to note that mobility and security didn't actually crack 30% compared to some of those higher choices. And then if we compare that to results after implementation, I mean, for a start, we see that security, now scores 39% in terms of what people actually got through implementation in comparison to what they thought they'd get. And mobility is also scored a little bit higher by people who are actually using VDI as opposed to people who thought they might. So yeah, you'll also notice that cloud seems to score quite lowly in what people wanted and what people actually got as well.
Sure. So thanks for that, Peter, and some interesting results there. Maybe if we go back one slide and look at the first set of data, talking about why people plan to adopt VDI, and we look at things like mobile working, flexibility, and easier maintenance. I mean, Andy, is that what you see when you talk to people? That's what they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, definitely. There's quite a significant number of points that need to be looked at to build that business case and justification behind it. Mobility is one of them. Flexibility, management and maintenance are quite high on there as well. IT teams are getting reduced quite substantially across all sectors. Therefore, they're wanting to deploy something that's much easier to manage. Interestingly, we do still see people talking to us about purely wanting to go down the VDI route to save money. And if that's the only driver behind it, we normally shake their hands and walk away. The initial capex of a VDI deployment against a traditional PC deployment is normally significantly higher. And this is where we've got to work with the customer base to build that business case around why you should be looking at something that the CFO is going to look at and go, that's twice as expensive. So we need to build that picture with them and take them on that journey and have that part of the expectation management process is assisting them having that story to take to the CFO to justify the reasons for going down a more expensive computing route.
And is that something that you see as well, Martin, that people sort of thinking about more, they've got to think more broadly than just, it's not about saving money?
It's not just about saving money, but as Andy said, the initial capex is fairly large.
Yes.
The operating expense over time means that's significantly reduced. So by using converged infrastructure and pre-packaged solutions, that's deployed quickly. It's one point of support. It's one single point of management. So all the cost savings are after purchase. So that's
Is there a rough timeline there that people can expect to start saving money, or does it depend on the...
Very difficult to judge that. It will depend on the end user case, the end user scenario, the number of desktops deployed, because as Martin said, although there are pre-packaged bundles, there are significant amounts of additional work and complexity that goes over the top of those base bundles to actually turn them into something functional. So that payback time will vary from customer to customer and vertical to vertical as well.
Yeah, one size certainly doesn't fit all in this case.
Right, okay. The other interesting result that came out there was that people looking at this for easier maintenance and upgrades. Now again, that sounds great for an IT team, one single sort of system to manage and upgrade. And again, is that a benefit that people want and do they get, or do they have to sort of manage their expectation on that as well? And actually it's not going to be this sort of flicker switch, it's all done, it's brilliant, or can it be that easy?
That is definitely something that they want. Designed properly, it can reduce the amount of maintenance on the desktop computing environment quite significantly. It's still a fairly complex environment to maintain and manage, but again, it comes down to the way it's been designed and put together. Converged infrastructure solutions do make that maintenance significantly easier than component build side of things in certain circumstances. But it comes down to having it built and designed properly, and then it will allow you to do that maintenance in a more structured and less labour-intensive fashion.
And being centrally located as a converged solution, it can be expanded over time as well. So whilst it's not one size fits all, if the business needs to expand over time, then by adding compute, adding storage to that base component, you can grow with the business.
It's certainly interesting because we hear a lot about IT being asked to do more and more, often with less. So if they can find something like this that can reduce some of their headspace and time, and obviously it does take some time, but they can reduce that, then help work on other projects. That seems like a good thing.
Definitely. If you get it right first time, you've done that expectation management, you've got the design right, you've kept it simple. One of the things that we do see quite regularly in VDI deployments is people massively overcomplicating things, and some of it down to sales guys telling them they need to buy this to make it work. Actually, you can deploy very powerful, capable VDI deployments, keeping it incredibly simple. And actually, the simpler you keep it, the easier the maintenance and the manageability is, and that's where you'll start seeing the real benefits. That you can have one guy looking after 10,000 desktops, and people look at you and go, really? It's perfectly capable if you've got the system designed right, that you can have a single administrator looking after 10,000 desktops.
Interesting. And one other sort of set of data that Peter touched on as well was security. It's at 23% as a benefit, which perhaps is lower than you might think. Again, one system to manage makes life a lot easier. But again, is that something where it's not as simple as you'd like it to be, maybe?
Very rarely do you see that as a key driver. It's a consideration, but not a key driver, unless you're in environments, banking, national government. Security is not the key driver behind it. It's an additional benefit that they start to realise post-deployment. We do talk about it as part of the customer engagement, keeping all your data in a single location, making sure it's backed up, managed, maintained, and all those. And VDI does enhance that capability. But the majority of customers have already got that kind of thinking in place anyway, that they know where their data is, they know how they're backing it up. This is just an additional layer on top of that makes managing that data environment a little bit easier. So that we don't see it as a key driver in the majority of the deployments, right. But it's a consideration that actually I think your poll shows afterwards is something that's actually that's a real benefit.
And I think it was something maybe we were talking about before we started, but it's about interpreting what you actually mean by security as an end user, because as you say, it's more about where the data's kept and knowing where the data's kept as opposed to kind of stopping people entering your system, which is what a lot of people think security means. So very positive, I think, the stats show.
Sure. Well, and maybe if we move to that next set of data showing like what benefits people do achieve by going to VDI, and again, we do see security is quite high up there, mobility as well, but also we see things about, and we see that maintenance as well, but we also see things about like mobile and flexible working becomes quite high because of VDI can be achieved quite well. Again, is that something that you think, why people are moving to VDI, and that
I think it's one of the primary drivers is people the increased people working from home, moving around. It's certainly driving that route, and the ability of the infrastructure to grow and increase in size as those numbers of workers increase in size is a key thing as well.
We're seeing a lot of our local government customers are starting to reduce the amount of real estate that they own, which means that they've got more workers than they've got seats. So this whole flexible mobile working is becoming more and more relevant to a lot of these organisations. And the idea is, if you've designed your VDI infrastructure properly, is you're decoupling the end user's device away from the desktop that's been provided. So with the advent of tablets that you've got here, means that you can pretty much do your work on the VDI corporate desktop pretty much from any device, from any location these days.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and a final word then on cloud. That was touched on as well. And I think in the benefits slide, maybe we can see that one. It shows that it comes out relatively low, actually, lower than you think in terms of the benefits people achieve. Is that surprising to you?
Not at all. The complexity of deploying large-scale computing, desktop computing, into the cloud without a significant joined-up plan with the rest of where your infrastructure is and where the data's kept leads to some quite significant problems. The amount of bandwidth required to host a significant number of desktops out in the cloud is higher than most people are looking at. And until you start pointing some of these things out, the cloud starts off looking very, very appealing, but gets less appealing as the cost mounts and the complexity and the risk mounts by moving all of your computing out into the cloud. And the desktop does provide quite a significant number of problems if you're looking at hosting your entire desktop infrastructure out somewhere else.
Sure. Yeah, Martin, I noticed you nod along vigorously there. You agree with all that?
We're seeing customers, so virtual desktop provides the virtual desktop infrastructure, supporting platforms that enable that to exist, and we're seeing customers then start to decide where and what should be operated from the cloud. So cloud-ready applications can be used in conjunction with virtual desktop situations, and you get the best of both worlds. It's a matter about making the right choice of where the data sits, the right choice where the application sits.
So again, it can be done, it's just it requires that bit of planning and forethought. And
and again, it's building that business justification for it. There are a number of large organisations and some small organisations that have very successfully moved their desktop infrastructure into the cloud. Is it something that the majority of customers are looking at that we see? No, and I think the poll probably reflects that. If you've got the business case, then you'll do it. If you don't, and that business case is quite difficult to build, then you're not going to do it.
Okay, great. Well, let's move on now to look at our first poll results, in which we asked, do you use virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI? And the results were, 1%, we had 20% saying yes, but we were experiencing problems. 20% said they're in the process of deploying, and 60% said they're thinking about it. So that's quite positive, and the 60% are thinking about it, and that's probably why they're here listening to all this. And we have one in the process of 20% are in the process of deploying, and 20% who are experiencing problems as they do it. So it sounds like we're getting this mix of people who see the benefits, they want to do it, but it's not going as well as they might have hoped because perhaps they haven't put in that planning that they need to have done.
We've made a living of flying pretty much all over the world fixing failed VDI deployments, and it goes back to the opening conversation around the whole expectation management against technology argument. There is still there's such a huge choice out there. Although you've got three main virtualization platforms to use, there's such a huge choice of components that can go into that, which massively overcomplicate VDI deployments. And I think that's one of the things that converged infrastructure and hyperconverged infrastructure is trying to address, is removing some of the point and shoot complexity that's out there, or buying that component bag of bits and trying to put it together and get it to be done. Unless you're skilled in the art of putting the component parts together, there is great scope for making mistakes under horsepower, under RAM, under IOP, under network as well. And the hyperconverged and the converged infrastructure takes some of that risk away by pre-packaging it and going, it will deliver, and we'll guarantee it's going to deliver that side of it. So there is a good chance that more deployments will be successful now than they were probably 2 years ago. Knowledge is better. the component technology is better, but then the advent of converged, hyperconverged technology has taken some of that risk and complexity away.
So those 60% who are thinking about it, they really should think about it, because there is it's all
So
there.
we have pre-packaged size solutions for the average virtual desktop solution. There's no such thing as an average virtual desktop solution.
Yeah.
So the key element is understanding which of those kind of packaged solutions fits, and then what work needs to be added to it to make sure it delivers to the application performance required by the customers. And you mentioned bandwidth is absolutely key on that, in terms of getting the right amount of compute to storage communication.
Great. Okay, well, thank you for everyone who voted on the poll, and we're going to ask you another one now, actually, talking about hyperconverged infrastructure, asking what is your understanding of converged and hyperconverged infrastructure? And the answers are, we're using it, we're considering it, we have researched it, we're familiar with the term, we have no idea what it is. So if you want to vote on that poll now, we'll discuss those results a bit later on. So it seems like a good time, you've both sort of mentioned it, but let's really sort of, for anyone who's watching maybe not so au fait with the term, or just to make sure we're all on the same page about what we're talking about here, let's start with you, Martin. What do you mean here by hyperconverged and converged infrastructure? What exactly, what components, what areas are we bringing together?
So I think simplistically put, converged infrastructure is a set of compute, network and storage components pulled together and then managed from a single point. So it's basically a packaged solution. What we do is we take our own products and partner products and package them together, but we pre-test and pre-prove to a certain performance. Hyperconverged is subtly different in the fact that everything is in a single container. So normally a single chassis, where the network, storage and compute is self-contained within that chassis.
And normally then a software layer that sits over the top that provides the intelligence between compute, network, storage side of things.
And again, on a basic level, why is that better? Why does that help with VDI?
Again, it depends on the scenario. Sometimes it might not be better. There are ups and downs on both sides of it. Hyperconverged, the argument is there's much less maintenance to go on, and the scale-out capability is a lot easier. On the converged side of things, you've got the beauty of it being ratified by the converged infrastructure vendor. Fujitsu, in this case, will say it will do 250 of these desktops, 500 of these desktops, and also simplifies things like single part number to order, single part number for maintenance, single number when you've got an issue with it. But you do, on both the converged and the hyperconverged, lack a little bit of the flexibility that you get with a component build, because the component build allows you to pick best of breed from each of the stacks and put them together the way you want them to be done. Increases the risk that if you're not quite sure what you're doing, you can make a mistake, but if you do know what you're doing, then you can get some very good results out of component build. So they've all got their benefits, they've all got their downsides, and it's a case of part of that expectation management, sitting and working out which of those technologies fits best in a customer environment.
Well, it seems we've been talking a lot previously about, for IT teams, this can reduce a lot of time and headspace and hassles. Again, it sounds like component build can be great, but that's going to surely come with more time and complexity.
The real difference between the converged and the hyperconverged is that converged lets you scale compute differently to storage. So if you have massive storage demands, you can scale the storage out and keep the compute fairly small, or vice versa if you need to alter the performance. Hyperconverged is scale out of modular units. So you're scaling out the compute with the storage at the same time.
Yeah. Right.
So there's subtle difference in the way that you scale. But as Andy said, it's a matter of choosing the right solution that fits with the business needs.
And part of the drive behind it is reducing the complexity, because IT teams are getting smaller. Some of them don't have specialist storage administrators anymore. And moving into conversion and hyperconverged is removing the need for the traditional single component specialist and allowing generic IT teams to deploy this kind of infrastructure very, very quickly.
And has the rise of converged and hyperconverged infrastructure sort of kit products, has that helped with VDI being deployed by some of the customers you talked to, that now helps them get to where they want to go, whereas previously they weren't getting what they thought they were going to get?
I think it's de-risked it to a point, and it's cut down on the number of mistakes being made. But of course, with everything, there's a trade-off, is you're paying an uplift against component build on those elements. So it is de-risking it, and it's reducing mistakes being made, but you're paying for that privilege. So it's definitely making there's an impact in the business and in the industry going forward with both conversion and hyperconverged infrastructure.
But it's all a steady move towards software-defined. So traditional converged, it was typically around software-defined compute. Hyperconverged is more around software-defined storage as well. And the two things are starting to merge higher up the stack as well. So it's enabling easier control of those kind of modular units.
Okay. So Peter, turning to you, I think we had some research just asking people, whether they're using this. What did that show us?
Maybe these people should have just listened to the explanation there as a bit of a sell, because we're, as you can now see on the screen, we're looking at convergence, hyperconvergence very much still as a minority player. 3% using it. 33% don't know if they want to use it, which I find quite worrying. 30% saying no. We have 13% rejecting it, which means that there's 13% using it already when in the process of doing so, and 12% planning, basically. To move on to the next slide there, we also asked people what they considered to be the main advantages, and as you can see, we've got a series of fairly evenly popular reasons for perceived advantage. Ease of management, visibility, those are just narrowly ahead of easier maintenance, ease of speed and deployment, and easier support due to that single point of contact. Performance and bottlenecking and multi-vendor compatibility and automation, however, don't seem too important to people when using converged VDI. So there we go.
Great, thank you for that. So if we go back one slide, maybe look at the first set of data, we'll talk about people considering it. And we see, like a lot of people aren't, but there is that growing trend there, the 3, the 10 and the 12% of people who are either using it or looking to use it. So there is this shift. And again, is that do those ever surprise you, or does that sort of fit with what you're seeing in the market?
It comes back to the applications again, I think, because looking at the application set, there's a first stage to go to. Does the application lend itself to VDI? And that's a binary answer. Moving beyond that, if it does lend itself, then what do you need to put in place to enable that application to work correctly? If that comes down to GPU cards to get the performance at the graphics level, then there are certain cases when you need quantities, and maybe hyperconverged infrastructure then can't deliver because it is hyperconverged. It's very finite modular solutions. May not be able to contain the amount of performance to deliver against that application set. Converged, however, slightly larger units, not quite so shrunken, can deliver some of those performance benefits by using GPU cards. Or it may be that you have to go outside of that converge and go bespoke to deliver maybe massive performance around that arena. So there's genuine reasons why some of these, I don't know, we considered it but rejected it.
Yes.
They may fall into that category.
Well, so that maybe is a positive that they actually did think about it, but for them they realised, like you said earlier, it doesn't necessarily work.
Hyperconverged is still fairly new in the marketplace. Visibility and awareness of it is increasing. As I say, it goes back to the point that if you're looking at hyperconverged, you've got to be prepared to pay for the extra uplift of that specialist software to give you that kind of scale out capability, redundancy, and I suppose peace of mind that it's going to do pretty much what it says it's going to do. The big issue that we've always seen with the hyperconverged side of things, unless you're doing fairly generic kind of desktop computing, as Martin says, the flexibility there is not quite that you'd get with converged or component build. But if you wanted to deploy something quickly, easily, and have it up and running very quickly and easily to the base point of being able to supply a desktop, whether that desktop can actually do anything or not is where the magic comes afterwards. But that base infrastructure can be purchased and deployed very, very quickly on the hyperconverged side of things. But you are quite substantially reducing the amount of flexibility that you've got and increasing the cost of acquisition as well.
Okay, and you touched on there, Martin, about like the type of application people might want to be using on their VDI deployment. Is that again, because some people will be using very basic, simple stuff, but other people are quite intensive, applications, quite heavy workloads. Does the equipment and the kit out there now, can they handle that? If you deploy it right, can you power your high intensity applications? It's
a matter of doing the upfront investigation and then defining the solution that fits. And so say hyperconverged may fit in some circumstances, converged in others. We're confident that the servers that deliver the performance and the reliability to underpin VDI solutions, and we can add additional enhancements with accelerator cards for graphics intensive applications. But yes, but after that it's a matter of scaling out so you get the right number of CPU cycles for the application.
But in the past, where perhaps people had negative experiences of VDI, and even on lower, requirement applications, that's sort of evolving.
That's pretty much all gone now. All of the three major base platforms, Citrix, VMware, Hyper-V, have all got good end user experience if it's built properly. going on to the more complex compute environments and more complex use case environments, actually with the advent of vGPU technology now, you can go right the way up to being able to replace full-blown workstations with virtual desktops. It's a case, again, whether you've got the business case to do it, because the cost of acquisition of that virtual workstation is actually quite significant, but there are business cases where it makes sense to do it. So you can go right the way up to very high-powered workstations that are doing things, aviation design, city design, and all of the kind of CAD work that traditionally would have been excluded from a VDI environment, but be prepared to pay for it.
Sure. And so if we move back to that next slide now, where we looked at why people think what they'll get from using converged infrastructure to support VDI, and we see people talk about ease of management, visibility at 36% and simpler maintenance at 31%. Is that fair? Are they right to have that expectation?
Yeah, definitely. That is one of the major bonuses of going for converged and hyper-converged is simplifying the acquisition and post-acquisition support side of things. Single part number, single part number, single part number. And when it comes to renewal, again, you're on that single part number. So that side of it does greatly increase or reduces the complexity of acquisition and ongoing maintenance of those side of things.
Yeah.
There's still a significant amount of maintenance needs to be done around the actual environment you're delivering, but the base underlying infrastructure is much simpler to manage because it's at that point of one throat to choke.
And I suppose, like you touched on, maybe like schools, for example, they just want life to be simple. They haven't got great big IT teams.
Everybody does.
Well, yes.
More and more of the organisations now have got less and less IT administrators. Everybody's wanting a simpler life, and especially if they're looking at VDI, it's about reducing the time spent managing, maintaining the end user computing environment. And VDI can significantly do that if you design it right and get it right. And this just makes that even easier. Conversion and hyperconverged makes it even easier to reduce the amount of time and effort to actually do the day-to-day maintenance side of things.
It's a bit of a win-win on both sides.
At a cost.
At a cost, yes. But long-term, maybe the cost can be offset.
Yeah, there are some real long-term cost-saving benefits of looking at converged, hyperconverged infrastructure.
So single point of management, single point of support, and as Andy said, it's a single part number that you're providing. So Converge delivers against that. From Fujitsu, it's just one number to call, and that simplifies that whole support route. So it takes cost out over time, but not on that capital expenditure up front.
One of the other interesting results, people said 31% think it's ease and speed of deployment, which perhaps is surprising because often people think new IT installs not always easy. But is that fair?
Speed of deployment, that's exactly where Converge plays in. So pre-integrated, predefined, packaged solution, single part number. It's just delivered as a working base infrastructure. The smarts around making it work for VDI is what you understand the customer requirements are and put that on top.
Yeah.
But certainly rapid deployment is a key part of converged infrastructure. And hyperconverged as well in terms of deploying numbers of hyperconverged units to create a scalable solution.
Yeah, to get the base compute environment in place is slightly quicker with converged, hyperconverged. There's still a significant amount of work once it's been deployed because, again, we go back to the whole art of VDI is actually about what it can do for you. The infrastructure value is limited if it doesn't do what you want it to do. So the art in getting VDI to work properly is you can build the shiniest, fastest, best hyperconverged, converged platform on the planet, but if it doesn't deliver what the end user needs, then you've wasted all that time, effort and money. So the ability to get the kit in place and ready to start work on is quicker, but there's still a chunk of work that needs to be done afterwards to make sure it's fully integrated into your environment to allow your workforce to do what they need to do and contribute significantly.
Sure. Well, on that topic of needing to upgrade infrastructure, make sure everything can support what you're trying to do, I think we've got to find a bit of research from Peter looking exactly at that.
Yeah. So we asked people, did you or will you upgrade your supporting infrastructure specifically to support VDI? Again, you can clearly see the results. 67% of people said they'd upgraded their servers, 46% either way said networks and storage, 2% said other, and a fairly good 21% said none. So it speaks for itself, really. Yeah, so people they will upgrade their kit. And again, are we looking at this, does that help with converged infrastructure, or is that sort of instead of converged? How are we sort of differentiating here?
That's what I would expect. So to support VDI, people upgrade servers. That's where the cost benefits play in. Servers today are far outperform servers of maybe 3 years ago. So the cost benefit of deployment on faster, more reliable servers is key. So I'd expect people to replace what they have and therefore get that reduced cost to support that VDI infrastructure.
Very rarely do you see people running mixed environments where they run their server virtualization workload on the same set of hypervisors as their desktop virtualization. It's recipe for disaster. So what you will find is people will be buying new infrastructure to do the desktop job, because the dynamics of the compute for server and desktop are quite wildly different. Higher clock speeds, cores available, the amount of RAM available for your desktop, the amount of IOPS needed for the desktop environment significantly differ to the server environment. So you will see people will be looking at buying a new infrastructure to do the desktop side of it, be it component build, where they buy some servers, some storage and some network. The network might be able to take it already, or they'll go and buy a converged stack, or they'll buy a hyperconverged stack. But most of the time it will be new hardware that's being acquired to do the job.
Is there not a risk that if you bring all these new servers but don't upgrade your network, which you sort of alluded to there, that can let you down, and you do have to do all components if you want it to work as well as it can?
One of the big things that we see with VDI is, because it's what the end user sees, if everything behind it is working perfectly, then they're going to get a good user experience. If components are not working particularly well behind it, and it may be something that your email server is not working particularly well, if you've just put VDI in place, VDI will get the blame because the email server's not working. Your log-on times are very slow because your GPOs aren't being processed properly, or it's a bit untidy, or your printer scripts are not particularly good. But that environment is slow on your PC as well as the VDI. But the VDI is a new bit, that's a bit will get blamed. So where I say early days, this is an infrastructure project, not a desktop replacement project, because whatever's seen at that end will be impacted on by every single element of your infrastructure. Network may need to be upgraded, depends on the design of what you're putting in, depends on the number of desktops, you local storage or you central storage, will determine which of those elements need to be upgraded. But the end user sees everything that's either working brilliantly or not working particularly well that's sat behind that screen that they're working in front of.
Which is interesting, because it brings it back that all this stuff is great at the back end, but it's all about delivering that thing to the end user. And if they get a bad experience, the whole purpose of this is sort of mute, isn't it?
Yes, very much so.
Excellent. And Martin, sort of final thought, do you sort of think of that as well, that, again, it's all about getting every component right, because if you don't, everyone suffers.
It's about getting the components right to build the solution that fits and works with the applications. The application is key in every case. So understand what the application requires, and then either design or obtain a converged infrastructure that matches those requirements or works to those requirements. And that's when projects will be a success. As Andy said, trying to take an existing server virtualization estate and add VDI to it, the performance metrics are vastly different. And that's likely to fail as a project, and then VDI will never be tried again, even though it may be able to deliver tremendous business benefits. So absolutely, getting the infrastructure right for the applications concerned and delivering against the requirements, key.
It's all about that end user experience.
Well, we've had
got a good experience, then happy days.
We've got a question here. Someone said, how do I convince end users this is better for them?
Again, it goes back to expectation management. A lot of the larger projects that we've worked with is during the proof of concept and pilot phase is you go and find internal local champions. Those internal local champions are brought into the process of deployment of VDI, and the whole scenario is explained to them, the reasons why you're doing it, and they're involved in some of the decision-making processes that are going on, and they're the ones that are seeing and touching that end device and the delivered desktop at the beginning. And if you've got those internal champions that are on board and seeing the benefits of it, they'll go and tell their mates, who will then go and tell their mates, who will then tell their mates. We had one scenario that we did some work with a local council. They had a coffee and donuts day, and people were brought into the model office to see the pilot VDI environment working with coffee and donuts. And they'd drop in, they'd do a bit of work, they'd have a look around, and it gets people talking about it. It gets people bought into it. Be under no illusion. If that end user experience isn't good, you're in trouble, because that word will get out very, very quickly. And the animosity that it causes, if you then large-scale release it, will cause real problems. So it's a case of managing that expectation and managing the change process very, very carefully. Get internal champions, get them happy, get them on board, and then the rest of it will follow naturally if you've got it doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah,
So
and we have
bring donuts.
Donuts are good.
Donuts and coffee, yeah. Sorry, Martin, you were going to say.
No, we have infrastructure readily available to help support Andy in proof of concepts, that to get out there and show the benefits that can be obtained, and to get that buy-in. and that's absolutely key to getting a successful project initiated. So providing the infrastructure, do the proof of concept, try the application, make sure it does work and does deliver, and then spread the word out in the organisation.
Yeah, we won't do a deployment without a proof of concept minimum.
Yeah.
We do know that there are customers out there that have bought without doing proof of concepts. You are, because of the way that the desktop computing environment is changing, you're leaving yourself open for real problems without running a proof of concept. And that proof of concept needs to be actually quite intense, and you need quite a lot of buy-in from the customer's IT team, because you do need to check everything that's mission critical, be it a mission critical application, a mission critical worker type, or a mission critical peripheral that these guys rely on a day-to-day basis. They all have to be checked, and the whole workflow process needs to be checked as part of the proof of concept, because from there you can then start looking at scaling the solution out to a full-blown deployment. And if you get that right, then you're laughing. But if you get 3/4 of the way through a deployment and you go, well, this app doesn't work, was it testing the proof of concept? No. And suddenly, bang, you've stopped the entire project because you didn't test one application.
Sure.
So the POCs need to be very, very carefully managed.
Great. Okay. So we'll just final point of finishing off this second slide question that we asked. So we asked, what's your understanding of converged and hyperconverged infrastructure? 50% said they were familiar with the term, and 50% said they had no idea what it is. So hopefully those 50% are now enlightened and illuminated from our discussion here. But to sort of finalise on that, it sounds like really like so many things in technology. It all sounds complex, but really it just comes down to common sense, planning, people, get people on board who need to be on board, and really just taking your time and not rushing into things, which sounds like maybe was what happened in the past, where people just, this sounds great, and just did it without thinking.
Keep it simple. I think a lot of time in the past, to mask inefficiencies in some of the hardware that was available and some of the expectation of what that hardware was supposed to do, there was all kinds of software and various other bits and pieces that were flooding onto the market to try and recover broken VDI deployments. Huge amount of it is snake oil. It's not required if you go back and keep the infrastructure design simple, but keep the end user as the primary focus. If they're the primary focus and you work backwards, you can keep that infrastructure simple and very performant, without having to use huge amounts of expensive stuff to mask the fact that you've not done that work properly in the first place.
Martin, do you agree with that?
I agree. And the fact that today servers are so performant in their own right, and we can enhance that with acceleration for specific graphics applications. We've got the tools to do that, but it does come back to understanding the interaction of applications themselves and what the user expects from those applications. So apart from that, VDIs, or most deployments I think these days, can be a success if approached carefully and, to say, keep it simple.
Yeah, sure. One of the questions that's come in as well is someone asking about costs, and they're saying that it sounds like you have to spend a lot of money up front, and that's hard to get a sell on. How do you convince people to look beyond the price up front?
It's sitting down with them. Again, it's part of that initial process is away from the technology. It's about working with them to build a business case, to show them the real benefits of what you're trying to achieve or what they're trying to achieve. The security, the flexibility, the manageability, the mobility, all of those will build a business case around the reasons to go for VDI. You are still, as Martin said as well, you're looking at a significant CapEx investment. But if you then start working with them to look at the long-term cost of ownership and that return on investment side of things, that's where the VDI platform, if designed properly and cost effectively, starts to look a good bet. But it's about building that picture, and it's about going on that journey, because you're looking average deployment of a VDI desktop's probably twice the cost of a PC when you just look at initial CapEx. So you've got to justify that bit, and you can do that by working with the end customer to build that business case for them to go back to the people that control the purse strings.
And the customers you talk to on that, do you consider, are they sort of quite advanced in that thinking, do you think, or are there more out there who are now...
It goes right from the, I never thought of that, right the way to, we've been through this entire process and we've got the justification to do it and we understand why we're spending that extra money. So there's a broad spectrum there.
Sure. And Martin, final thought from you on this. I mean, we talked about at the beginning of the problems that have caused some people pain on VDI. It sounds like they can be now avoided. Do you think, again, it's just about that slow sort of maturity of this as a technology idea? We'll see it become far more prevalent in organisations of all types as the technology and the understanding improves.
The key failures in the past, I think, with VDI have been all around the performance rate of the application. So server performance these days is massively increased over, say, 2-3 years ago. The additional technologies that can be added to the servers from the graphics front massively increased. So those brought to bear correctly, and an understanding of the requirements of the customer, deliver successful VDI solutions. But it is all about slow, steady, understanding it, and as Andy said, testing the applications up front to make sure they actually work in a VDI environment. If they're not going to work in that, there's no point in continuing. It may be worth isolating those applications somewhere else, and maybe focusing VDI on the remainder. There may still be benefit in doing that.
Okay, so there's hybrid.
There's less chance now of screwing it up because you've not spec'd the back end properly.
Yeah.
You can still screw it up because you haven't talked to the end user to find out what they want to do, but there's less chance of making a mistake because you don't have enough CPU, you don't have enough RAM, you don't have enough disk I/O. Because, as Martin says, the toys have moved on quite substantially over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so get those 2 bits right, and really you should get the benefits, and not just for now, but going forward for several years.
Definitely.
True.
Yeah, excellent. That seems like a very good point to end on a positive note. So, Martin, Andy, Peter, thank you very much for your time, and thank you all for watching. Hope you found that very interesting, and it's all available again to watch on demand at your leisure if you missed any of it and want to watch it again. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and have a good day. Thank you.